it helps to have a microphone when you start. So sorry about that. Welcome back to Midweek with the Maker. I'm your host, Jeremiah Bachhaus with Umbrella Forge. Hopefully you know that because you're following me on Instagram and on YouTube and wanting to come with me in the Forge and Forge adjacent type projects. Today happens to be one of those adjacent projects. Even though we're out here in the Forge, I did the setup so that we can do some leather work out here because we've made the axe. Last week we just did a quick project of the hook. Today is a little bit longer project. I know our younger viewers like the short videos. This one might be a little bit longer because we're going to make a bit cover for this axe that we've been working on. So it's going to be a total package by the time it's all done. So I'm gonna be futzing with the camera a little bit. I didn't really like the auto tracking feature that we used last time. Personally, I found it kind of distracting with everything shifting. So I'm going for a more stationary view this time. Tried to raise the camera up just a little bit. I got told that I look like a jolly green giant. Ho, ho, ho. So we'll see. Hopefully this is a little bit of a better organization, a little better setup at this point. I like talking about philosophy as we get going too, but I also like talking about literature / poetry. Actually, they're the same thing. I have a friend who sent me this wonderful book, John Keats' The Major Works from Oxford World's Classics. So I wanted to share a poem with you guys today. Last week was blustery. I was kind of in a bad mood. I don't know if it was seasonal affect disorder or whatever, but it's April and you never really know what's going to happen. So I wanted to read a poem to make myself feel a little bit better. And so John Keats wrote a poem on the grasshopper and the cricket. And it brought me a little bit of joy. So I want to share that with you guys. So bear with me. We'll get to the project in a minute. The poetry of earth is never dead. When all the birds are fainted with the hot sun and hide in cooling trees, a voice will run from hedge to hedge about the new-mown mead. That is, the grasshopper's. He takes the lead. In summer luxury he has never done with his delights, for when he's tired with fun, he rests at ease beneath some pleasant weed. The poetry of earth is ceasing never. On a lone winter evening, when the frost has wrought a silence, from the stove there shrills the cricket song, in warmth increasing ever. It seems to one in drowsiness half lost, the grasshoppers among some grassy hills. That's John Keats on the grasshopper and the cricket. That just reminds me to seek warmth where I can. It's nice that I'm by a fire most of the time, but even in my walk to work or when I open the door and I get that wintry blast, on the grasshopper and the cricket, just something to enjoy. All right. So like I said, I'm going to be playing with adjustments here. So our project today, we've been working on the axe. I'm going to hold it this way because then it shows off the touch mark. See if I can get it up nice and close for you guys right there. So when I do my bit covers, I try and make the function of it where it opens up so you can pull it off. I try and put it on the same side as my touch mark. The reason for that being, even though somebody bought it from me, they know who I am. I want other people who look at it to pick it up and go, oh, I wonder what that JB with the arc thingy on there is. And then they can say, well, it's Umbrella Forge, Jeremiah Bachhaus. So that's what we're going to start laying out, is the bit cover here. Now, again, I still have some dirt on the handle from actually handling this piece. But I'll clean that up later after I finally got the bit cover figured out, and then I'll clean up the very bottom of the handle because the bottom of the handle will actually get a little bit dirty during the setting process. So any type of final adjustment on there is the very last thing that happens. And so I'll clean off a lot of this dirt with some steel wool later on. So now I'm going to adjust the camera. We're going to put it down, and you're a very disappointing camera. No, we're gonna move it down here so you guys can see my workstation as I've laid it out. So you're not going to be looking at my mug the whole time here. We'll go down here Let's see if that, switch to the camera. Yeah, that looks pretty good here. So we're gonna lay out the camera. It's gonna be upside down for you guys. If you've been with me this whole trip, you know I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm figuring out the layout portion of working with the camera here. Things that we need leather. You just saw me move that out of the frame. We need paper because we're gonna try and do a little bit of, we're gonna be nice to future us and lay things out so that when we actually cut leather, we can do that in the most efficient manner so that we don't have a lot of waste. I don't like wasting anything. Like I said before, reduce, reuse, recycle. That's the type of environment that I came from, and I try and work that. So I've got paper. I forgot to grab a pencil. Fortunately, in the shop, in any of my shops, I always keep a lot of pencils around so that I'm ready to go whenever I want. So I start with just a piece of scrap paper. In fact, I pulled this one out of the trash, and I'm trying to find where that fold over is going to be nice. And I want to leave, what I like doing is making it an integral strap so that I'm not trying to rivet on a second piece of paper, or rivet or stitch a second piece of leather. Everything is kind of one piece as it snaps on. And with this little bit of swell to the axe bit itself, that actually helps us to hold things on a little bit tighter. It's only going to go so far before everything catches. That's why we have to have it open. Now, another big feature when we have this and we wrap things around is, you notice if I make it tight along the top, the edge of the paper actually goes way off to the side. And that this type of look right here is not really good. It's displeasing, and it'll be hard to do any kind of cleanup. So I want to be mindful of that as I'm laying out my stencil here, or my template. And just a regular piece of paper tends to be okay. If I find that I'm really struggling with one piece of paper, I'll get some tape out and I'll extend it, because ultimately the paper is ready to be thrown away. So I'm just using this to get my guidelines for when I actually lay out on the leather itself. So there are a lot of tricks that you can use to make sure that this gets a nice flush fit. So I'm going to just kind of fold the paper here, and that gives me a rough, I just have to remember that when I lay it out flat, I've got that little fold there to help me out. So I like a nice solid solid straight line here. So that's going to be my first kind of marking, is trying to, I can't hide it while I'm doing this. I just do a little tracing all the way around. Yes, I've got the rubberized wax on the top here. I'm keeping that on just because I don't want to hurt myself accidentally. Okay. So now, with this extra flap that I said I wanted to use as the wraparound, I'm just going to continue in the slope of the bit. I like that look. Then I'm going to fold this piece back over and actually flip the whole axe. And now I'm going to trace that line. Okay. So now, and on this side, which will be the presentation side, that side I'll actually follow the curvature of the beard so that you can get some character to the piece that's shown. I also want to make sure that I scribe right along the top. So now you can see where that fold comes in, creates the line, and then it'll fold over really nicely. This is all backwards, of course. This is just the starting process. Now, if you wanted to do more stitching, I'm going to do a pretty simple riveted construction on this one. If you wanted to do stitching, I could actually cut this in the leather and then stitch all the way around. You end up with a really large welt layer when that happens, and I don't like that. I like to use the leather itself to wrap around the top. That one, it's a lot less stitching. Two, it's a simpler welt layer. Three, when people put their bits, the bit cover on and off, it's more integral. You know, they're not going to cut on the top really easily on that. So I make that note so that it's there. Now, there's a couple, this is a template now of the bit itself. This is not what we want to cut out on the leather. If we do that, it's going to be way too small. You have to remember the thickness of your material. So the paper obviously is paper thin. So I'm just on the inside without accounting for any of the material of the leather itself. So I need to add to the top and bottom at least the thickness of the material here. So what we're seeing is this piece of paper might actually end up being too small, but that's okay. I also drew my squiggly line right here only on the edge of the bit, and that's not enough room for stitching, welt layer, or riveting. So I need to add material to the front as well. So like I said, I'm just doing a rivet here. My rivet heads are about 3/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is just kind of freehand, get some more of this stuff out of the way. I'm going to freehand the line about 1/2 an inch to 5/8 of an inch around that bit. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me extra material for running any kind of seam that I want. That will make this work. And if I cut this out and then when I transfer it over to the leather, I'm actually going to add just a little bit more, because if you've watched some of my other videos, you know that future me is an idiot. So I wanted to give myself a few more chances to be able to get this right. So seeing how we are right there, we can just start with cutting this out. Now, if you got a pair of scissors, that's nice. I have some, but I just want to get to work here. So I happen to have a razor blade. So let's just take this razor blade. And that first little bit here is just gesture drawing. So I just try and make it a nice, even slope there. So now I've got a template here that with that fold over, and again, you could tape that so that it doesn't become an issue. Now, paper is not going to stretch. Leather will. So I can give myself just a little bit of grace in that when I lay things out here. The other thing that happens by giving myself a little extra room here, if I just fold it straight over and keep that seam straight here, I can adjust. I can change that line by grinding material off here, because that covers so much of the piece. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm all right. We're doing okay. Leather, a lot of different leather sources that you can find out there. As I talk about leather, I was reminded of something that I watched where a guy was saying how much he likes leather, and this whole Kydex thing is a fad, and somebody says, "Get with the times, boomer," or something like that. I've used Kydex a couple times. I'm really not a big fan of it. I don't find it to be as cool. There's just something about leather that makes me happy. It's tactile. You can smell it. You can't smell Kydex. Well, maybe you can. It's plastic. I don't know. But again, being a controlled hand forging guy, I like my coal, all of that stuff. The leather, maybe it's just old school that I like. So I'm giving myself just a little bit of leeway up here on this will be the wrap part that comes down. I've laid it out flat. I'm going to try, actually that's how I am going to do it. I'm just going to lay it flat and I'm going to allow myself some space to adjust. Tracing my line, like I said, I'm giving myself just a little bit of grace here all the way around, so that line isn't necessarily straight. It's not matching the template exactly. I'm using a pencil here because this is really, I've got good lighting. If I had poorer lighting, I would probably use a pen just because it shows up. The problem is if you use a pen, then you've got something that you're going to have to clean up after a little bit. So here I am. I'm also going to add just a little bit more material down here at the very bottom. Okay, for my wrap. So moving the template up to the side, that's pretty much done now. I don't think I'll need to come back to that. I don't do a test run here, so there is totally a chance that I could mess this part up, and then everybody will laugh at me, and we'll all go. So now I'm going to use my razor blade here, and I've actually made myself a sickle knife. I made a really nice Damascus one, but because it's a me project, I have not finished it. So it's sitting actually just a little bit behind the camera and waiting. It's fully heat treated, but actually I was using my my surface grinder attachment for like maybe the third time I used it, and I had an issue, so I ended up not having a nice flat surface grind on it. So it's got it's got a bit of character to it. Doesn't really impact the use of the tool, but it's enough that it's something that I have to fix, and that's always irritating. All right, so there we are. I've got my leather cut out here. You can see that it folds over all right. I've got enough material here to come back around, and then we do just a quick test fit. What'll happen? Okay, well, if I make it tight on here, you can see we've got that distortion. But it's also not really a bad thing for that little lip right up here to be there, because it makes it easier to put the axe in. Now there is a line, there's a limit to this, but when I line this up here, looking at giving myself some space, I'm actually feeling all right by that. I give myself quite a bit of grace here. Once that's pinched in, well, actually, I may have given myself too much grace here. This might just be too big. That's okay. That's okay. I often find that even little scraps of leather come in handy around the place. So actually at this point, I'm going to take this rubber off just so I can see exactly where that edge is. And keep working here. What if I do that? I don't mind that. working with leather, one of the things that leather actually enjoys is having a little bit of moisture in it, especially if you're doing some bending like this, because you can bend it while it's dry and it doesn't really sharp bend. But if you put a little bit of water on there, not a lot, it doesn't take much water at all, it'll become way more pliable, and you'll be able to get some better bends there. So with that in mind, I'm going to grab some fresh water, and by fresh I mean I'm going to step outside. I happen to have a rain bucket, so using rainwater here, and I'm just going to dab my finger in. I can see that's kind of where, yeah, if your hands are dirty though, it'll transfer. Good thing I started on the inside. Okay, so you can see I'm not really putting all that much water on at all. Just there's a slight discoloration to the leather, and that's really about all you need, because now it'll fold so much tighter. So much tighter. And if you pinch and work some of that moisture out, now it wants to stay folded instead of flopping over. So I like that. I like that a lot. I like that a lot. So knowing that I'm going to try and clean things up just a little bit more, I'm going to open up here, and I'm going to trace again. This time I'm going to trace right along the edge so that I can see right where the bit of the axe is. This is important for when I do my trimming now. After I've got my rough cut of leather out there, I'm going to need to trim it again as I get closer to putting everything together. And again, we're tracing mostly on the inside. Well, right now, all on the inside. So you can see that's how it comes together. This bottom side, I actually could trim off completely at this point, and almost to my finished level. So I just like to check and see if that's how we want it to. Let's pinch it just a little bit more. Yeah, that looks a lot better. So looking at this, okay. Actually, I'm gonna leave that for now. I go back and forth sometimes with a bit cover, and especially when I do a bottom latch, I don't always rivet on the bottom. If I'm doing, actually, I can't really do that because if I rivet on the bottom, that means the bit cover is going to be coming on and off this way. This guy is actually going to be intended to come in like this. So I don't want any kind of rivet down there on the bottom. So we're gonna fully commit, and we're just gonna cut that off. And I haven't gone through for a full sharpening of this guy. There it is. But I always get a little bit of joy when I use the tool that I made to help make the sheath. You also notice I've got a plastic table set up here. That's for what you just saw me do. When I need to do cutting through this in any way, I'm going to make sure that I've got something directly underneath. I'm going to make a little mark here just so that I know when I'm putting things back together how I want it to be. All right, laid out here, we can see I got plenty of room for putting my rivets. Again, in fact, probably too much room, but that's okay. It's with leather, because you can stretch leather, but you can only stretch it so far. I want to make sure that I don't have too little material. It's always better to start with too much and then reduce from there. So we're going to next trace another line, and again we're going to try and go out about 1/2 inch through to 5/8. And on the bottom of the flap side, I'm actually going to stop kind of in line with where the axe itself is. I don't want to trace anything out here because then it's something that'll potentially be seen. So I want to try and keep any guidelines, any material or marks that I put on the leather have to be either hidden or cleaned up. So by keeping them hidden, I'm in a better place. All right. So there's about 1/2 inch right there. I can take one of my rivets here and I can lay it on there, and you can see, I don't know, can you see? Yeah, let's see. That head fits just in between those two lines. Now, you may think that's fine, but the problem is once you set these leather rivets, they flatten out just a little bit. So this is actually too narrow. So I need just a little bit more space there, which is fine. I know that now, so I can do my next cut. And when it comes to leather work, I am very much of the opinion I'm going to cut it long, and then I'm going to dress it back. So I'm going to come out just a little bit outside of that line there. And I'm going to be very careful. The more I keep this even, the less cleanup I have to do. And that's why when you have a standard size that you forge to or work to, you can get your clicker punchers and stuff like click punches and just have the exact shape that you want cut out every single time. However, in bespoke hand forged pieces, each one's a little bit different. So I don't really have any templates that I use across the board. I have to basically reinvent the wheel every time. But that's okay. One of the things that it allows me to do is learn from my mistakes. Yeah, I'll make a mistake pretty much every time. Go through, that's nice and clear. So you can see this is really starting to come together here. Lay it here. We can see that seam, it ends right there. Now, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to follow that arc and cut down here so that instead of this really wide tab, we have a little bit narrower tab for releasing the button so that the tool can be released from the bit cover. So I'm just gonna not make any really sudden changes. Just going to allow that knife to cut through with that simple arc. I got a little tendril somewhere here that's not wanting to let go. One more. There. So now we can see if I fold it over here, I got my back line here where I want it to be, and it's starting to look a lot nicer. Again, I'll wet that piece out when it's time for attachment. Now, this extra little bit of leather that I have here, I can use that because I know that it follows the arc. I can use that piece as a welt layer. So now the welt layer, ouch. The welt layer, if I just attach this together, with stitching it's a real issue because you can take your bit and you can shove it in there too far and it can slice all that. With the rivets, it can't slice through, so it's not really necessary for a welt layer, but I don't want those rivets dulling up the bit of my axe. So by taking another piece of leather and putting it in there, it'll hit the leather before it hits the rivets. We're off to a much better type situation there. So just try and match the angle on this top. And if it sticks out, I don't really mind. I don't really care because I'll trim that off. And I can see how it lays. So that lays together fairly nicely. I'm all right with that. And I see that it gets a little bit, goes a little bit off of my line right here at the bottom, but that's fine because I can pronounce the bit arc just a little bit more if I feel I need to. So I'll cut this welt line. Actually, I just need to get rid of that material because it's messing with my universe. I can trim that welt layer pretty much at any time if anything sticks out too far. The problem will be once I put my die on, then anytime you cut, you end up revealing non-dyed areas. So we'll just try and cut through, keeping it in line. There. So now, as I pinch this end together, we can see that the bit actually opens up, and it's going to open up in just a perfect way for receiving that axe, and that makes me super duper happy. The other benefit of retrimming is you can see if I continue this line, if I continue this line, now that little point gets even better. So I like what I'm seeing here. So this is all looking really nice. This next stage I like to do when I'm doing a rivet construction. I'll move that out just a little bit. I do at least 3 rivets, and I try and space them evenly. So I just pick the starting spot for one, and I'm going to use my welt layer to help guide me through this process. So there's my first one. And then I have a set of dividers. Dividers are, this is the tool that conquered the world. So for as much as I love my axes and I love my hammers, this is really the tool. So I do this relative. Okay, you could take some time and you could figure this out precisely mathematically, but I like them relative to each other. This makes for a really good look. Don't need a whole lot of spacing. I don't need to put like 5 or 6 rivets in here. Three is going to hold this just fine. So I'll take my leather punch and punch out my holes. So that these guys are all marked out. And then I put this guy back on. Kind of laid out close. Actually, it needs to be there. Okay, where it's going to live. I use a pencil for this. You can use a transfer punch. Transfer punches. Oop, you know what? I realized. Oh, we're good. Transfer punches are fine for this type of work, but I want to see a mark at the end. And it's a all right. So now I've got, let's see, yeah, I've got little marks for me to go on here. And when you're leather punching, it's the hardest part is trying to make sure that you got that little mark right in the middle of your punch itself. So we do a dry fit. Yep, everything's looking like it's lining up just fine. So we'll close this over, hold it in place. And then try and shove that pencil down as far as you can. Hopefully I can hit all 3. And I did, so I got my hole placements here. So now if I line everything up, fold it over, and we got daylight through all 3 of the holes. So that's exactly what we want to see. So now we start doing our a little bit of setup here. I have rivets. I need 3 of them. Not 4, 3. I guess I would call this, pre-cleaning or pre-cleanup. So I'm going to loosely fit these together. This style of leather rivet, there's a little crimp, and it'll actually snap onto the rivet head. You can hear that little click, and now they don't come apart. So I can loose fit these things a number of times, and then be able to check and see, is everything working the way that I want? It'll hold together enough that if I need to trim something off, it should come out all right. And this is I call this my medium size rivet. So it may merit actually having large rivets, just because of how much material is in there. Yeah, you can see they're not really sticking together at this point, just because the rivets themselves are just a shade small. Just a little bit. I can see it sticking through that second layer, but not quite enough to catch. So what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna, now there's a specific tool that one could get called a skiver, or a skiving tool. And what the skiving does is it thins out leather. But I'm going to do it just with my little razor blade here, because I don't think I really need to remove all that much. Want to be just having a little bit of leather there is all you need, and that'll be plenty for stopping the bit from doing any damage to itself or the rivets. So don't worry about, not too worried about going super thin on that. A couple people popping in and out. Thanks for joining. I don't know, I try and do this around 11 o'clock so that some people might be, it's 11 o'clock my time, Central Standard. But I got some friends and people out east I know that watch, so I figured they're at lunchtime. And you know, people on the West Coast, well, let's be honest, they're on West Coast time, so they can watch whenever they want. So still not quite enough to clip in fully. I think it's enough. It's enough for our purposes. But here, let's do this. I know it'll clip through two layers. So I'll start with pre-cleaning just the welt layer. That's the one that I'm most concerned about because it's sticking out pretty far on the top. Where am I? I drop one of my. Oops. Nope. Nope. I think one of my caps rolled away. Oh, it's still stuck in there. So they're loosely clipped. So I'm going to go after the welt layer here, and I'm just going to try and cut it gently following the leather of the actual bit cover itself. And because I gave myself so much extra, I'm not really worried if I do cut into that just a little bit. But steady hand and a sharp blade, you can figure out a lot of things. There. That's just a little proud. So now I'm actually going to trim just a shade off of the actual wrapping itself. Now, I don't want to get too fussy about the edge because that part's going to need to get addressed again anyway. It doesn't really matter, even if you cut it. Well, maybe if you do cut it right on, it's not going to matter, but or you're not going to have to. But you have to come back and you have to sand and burnish the edge of any of these exposed pieces here. So I just want to transfer the welt layer over to the other side. Looks really good up on the front here, down at the base. I know I trimmed the outer layer, so we'll just trim just a section of that off as well. Okay. That leaves us with now trying to figure out where to make this next hole for the actual strap, find out where I want that to be. So again, I'm going to wet this right around that fold, which I have marked where the bottom of the axe itself is. So this little area down here, that's where I want to get wet. I don't know. I'm just gonna dab some water on there and see if it works out well. We'll get happy little bends. Try and tackle inner, be the Bob Ross of blacksmiths right here. All right, so there's a bend. I can kind of envision with the axe in there. Can see it folds tight right there. And to my mind, I want to put that right there. So I put it in the middle because it allows me, you can see there's a little bit off, but I knew there was going to be some off there. So adjusting for that, we're just fine. So I pop that hole. And then we need to mark out where that hole is going to end up on the main cover. So use our pencil transfer punch. Boom. All right, so clean our workstation just a little bit here. So there is the bit cover kind of as it stands. I'm not going to need to punch any more holes because all the holes that I need are now in there. And I like to punch my holes before I do the dyeing. The reason for that is sometimes some of those holes can be exposed, and it just doesn't look that nice having a veg tan appearance. You got this nice colored piece, dyed piece, and then you've got your veg tan color. So I've hit that stage of life where I now, whenever I'm doing any kind of dyeing work, I wear gloves. I didn't used to care about it, but I've kind of gotten tired of the dye on my skin for ever and ever and ever. I mean, eventually it wears itself off, but so I'm going to use some vintage gel on this bit cover, which is, it's nice. I like it because it goes on easily. It's also, it doesn't oversaturate typically. I just rub it in, let it set for a while. And with the vintage look, if there are any dirty spots, it doesn't overdo it. You know, it won't stop working because there's dirt there. It kind of works around it. It builds it in because vintage stuff is dirty. So I can rub it in. The longer I leave it set, the deeper it likes to work itself in. And I can just rub it all over. You can see on the back side how that dye has already gone through. And we end up with a pretty awesome color, I think, all the way around. And I don't like to leave a whole lot of dye color on my bench. This is a temporary bench, so it's not that big of a deal. But on my main leatherworking shop, I have years of leather dye built up on there, and occasionally, if I'm not careful, I will set a piece down and then discover that it's picked up some new color. So I now taken to making sure that I wipe up or use my scrap leather pieces if I'm using a dauber to make sure that I don't leave too much extra dye on the table. All right. So just rubbing it in. That's another reason I like it with the dye, the traditional leather dye. You just watch the vascular effect of the stuff, and it just soaks it right up. This stuff, you rub it in, you watch how it works, and then I like the tactile feel of it. It also makes it way more malleable. So now this stuff is nice and soft, and you remember I was talking about the getting it wet so that I can move it. Now it's thoroughly saturated, and that's how I like it. That's good. So we'll take a cloth here. We'll wipe off shop towels. Never have too many shop towels. I actually need to make a run and get some more. Now on the felt side of the leather with this the one downside I think of this vintage gel is that the felt side will kind of shed. So I'll end up with some lighter splotches, but that's the inside, and that's okay. So we're off to a great start here. Okay. So there we go. That is how there's our bit cover as it stands. I'm gonna make sure I don't really care if I get any of the leather dye on the axe itself, but if I get it on the handle, that'll irritate me. Okay, that all looks pretty good. So there it is. what I do want to do while I have this here is I want to grind out. That's how so I'm looking at right now, I'm looking at this little overlap. Now, you could not care about it just because you only see one side at a time. But what I like to do is I like to take this actually to the grinder, my metal grinder or whatever. My parents used to own a cobblery shop, boot and shoe repair, and so I've learned most of my leatherworking stuff there. My dad taught me a bunch. My uncle taught me a bunch. But they even had sanders in cobblery shops. So what I want to do is I'm going to take this over, and then I'm just going to use the grinder and the platen is actually going to make this line nice and straight, and I'll be able to line it up exactly where I want it. I don't need to have the welt layer in there because that line remains the same. So it's just one less functioning piece or piece that I need to worry about. So I'm going to move this here. I'm going to use the grinder real quick and then come back. I'd like to get this project wrapped up today. So we're gonna make a push if I can find the belts that I need. The key with grinding leather or sanding leather is you don't want a super aggressive grit, and you don't want to go fast. Okay. Of course, as with everything, if you've got a new belt, that's even better. But all right, my friends, it's going to get a little loud here. I'll try and be quick. All right. So there we are. There's a little bit of tolerance that I have here. There's yeah. Sorry. You came in, if you joined right there, I was just grinding away on some leather here. I didn't want to take the time to move the camera. So we're trying to get this bit cover figured out. I've got it a little bit proud. Key with sanding on leather is don't push too hard. I'm notorious for pushing hard on my grinder. Don't do that with leather, because you'll end up singeing it very quickly. So now that I've got my back layer pretty much where I want it to be, what I need to do is trim off the hair side of the leather. Tends to make a flap. So we have our edge rounding tool. Kind of like with there's some other tools out there. I always like to work from the edge in. So just kind of be mindful of that, and especially if it's super thick, which this actually appears to be. So actually just, there's too much material there for the beveling tool to get through. All right. So do that on both sides. This is the area that the tool is going to be interacting with potentially, so I like to round that all the way. The other rounding that I'll do is actually on this side, where the tool you're going to be grabbing, or the end user is going to be grabbing to release the button, release the latch. So kind of move that around, and we got a decent looking bit cover going on there. If you wanted to take a little bit of time, I'm going to round this part out. In my leather shop, I have an arbor press set up where I can just set this in and ka-chunk, and it's not quite a click punch, but it's close. It's close, and I can get an arc or a radius that I've pre-made and pre-used that will give me the desired result. But you can do it by hand too. And ultimately, I want this little radius here to kind of fold over from all the good use that this axe is going to get. So I don't get too particular on this. Or at least I'm not with this one. Okay. So there we are. It looks all right. A couple schniblets left on. That's all right. They'll come off easily enough. Okay. Wipe off some of this leather dust, which really just kind of adds to that antique look, which is kind of neat. I have everything set up on my layout table, which you may have seen in other videos, which is on casters. So as I start rubbing back and forth, it actually shakes the whole table. So sorry about that. Okay, so now we'll dress the edges real quickly. We don't need a lot of our antiquing gel here. Or you accidentally squirt way too much and then you have a lot. Just run that around. So I like the antiquing gel, like I said before, because it doesn't seem to oversaturate anything, whereas sometimes your regular leather dyes can. But what kind of looked like a powdery mess just a little bit ago, really coming together. I guess I didn't have too much. I had just the right amount for what I wanted. So now we don't have a powdery mess anymore. We got something looking all right. Now I'm going to take this is just a piece of hard maple, and I'm going to rub it on the edge. So we're burnishing the edges. And again, with that antique look, that felt side, it just kind of rubs a little raw. I'm okay with that. I think it gives it, again, that more authentic antique look. Burnishing leather edges. Actually, the leather likes to be slightly wet. I used to try and make sure everything was completely dry before I would burnish. And now I've actually, if I don't have fresh dye on there, I might actually just put a drip of water on just to get some moisture to smooth that out. I said I don't mind it, but then I looked at it and it was too much. I had too much of that felt side showing through. All right. We're getting really close here. So I have a set of ball end stems here, which I like to use for my bit covers. I think they're classier than a pin system or a snap, like a pearl snap shirt. It's just a little ball, and it passes through the hole there. So I want to make sure I have this in place before I do any final assembly here. And it just screws on. Now it's at a flat head on the back side. Having almost put a flathead screwdriver through my hand once, I'm not a big fan of flatheads. But this is another good time to be wearing gloves, not because for trying to protect my hand from this shiv that I have, but to actually grab onto that peg. So that's in place really nicely. And we're almost there. Also want to make sure that you check that your ball goes through the hole that you have here. And if it doesn't, the simple fix, and this is how they're designed to be, is to just cut a little line at the base of the punch that the hole is supposed to go through. Okay, and then once you have that hole in there, you can push it down, and that fits together. And yes, that does have a little bit of exposed color, so I will deal with that. But I want to wrap this video up because we've been at it for a while. So we will do that. So I'm going to put my welt layer in, but I'm not going to do just rivets. I'm actually going to glue too. So I'm going to take my razor blade. I'm scuffing up the leather so that the glue has something to attach to. And yeah, someone might say, but your pieces are all still wet. Actually, the glue kind of appreciates the wetness there. It helps the curing process, from what I understand. So, but I want to make sure that I rough up any area that's going to have glue applied to it. Should have just a little bit of roughing up. And this is, the glue is probably my least favorite part because it gets everywhere. But having a well-made welt layer is super important for any sheath, bit cover, what have you. So I try and put a little bit of glue on all sides. It's very easy to overdo it here. But this glue, you can see how stringy it is afterwards, or once you put it on. Spread it out, and this glue actually really likes it if it can breathe for just a little bit. So you usually think of, all right, glue it together, and you smack the glue on and then try and clamp it. This actually, it wants to take just a little bit of time, and it actually gets stickier. Once it's slightly touched itself. Okay. Use my leather scraps. Like I told you, I use just about everything I can. You can see there it is. Didn't let it rest really long enough, but I knew I needed to line it up as well. So start at the base here. Run that in. Now I like to, this just gives me a peace of mind. I alternate. So I got one pin going this way, one pin going that way, and the last one's going to go that way. Okay, so there we are. And I like these little hammers because, or these little pins, because they're just hammer set. So there's one. That one needs to set a little bit better. There's two. And then some of that glue actually worked up into the rivet itself, which is awesome because that's going to help hold everything together. And there's three. Almost. All right, there's three. So you can see we got three rivets set together. We've got our barrel for, ball end peg. Again, it fits right there. And ultimately, it still needs to dry. Once it sits on there, it looks really nice, and we've got our fully completed bit cover. And there's a little play. That's all right. Once this hardens or dries out, it's actually going to harden back up. And a little bit of play doesn't bother me at all. I can clean up that front edge just a little bit, but we don't need to take any more time with the stream to do that. So there it is, our axe build and bit cover fully completed. So let's come on back up. All right, my friends, we've been at this for a while. So thanks for joining me with Midweek with a Maker with Umbrella Forge. Really appreciate you coming and spending a little bit of time with me. Hopefully you learned something. Please give me all those likes, subscribes, and whatnot on Instagram, on YouTube. Just trying to grow this. If there's something specific you want to see, let me know. If you have any questions, you can do that too. So I'm just a simple blacksmith trying to make a go of this. So if you guys have questions or there's something I can help you with, let me know. So thanks. Hopefully you guys get out there, go and make something of yourself.